The owner of the house, Kenzie, was setting the table and getting ready for her shift as a paramedic on the ambulance. Her husband, John, was running around the house and getting ready for another business trip. He owned a chain of fast food restaurants, with branches in different cities, so he was often on the road. The man wailed, "Honey, is the bag ready? And where's my shirt? And the briefcase with documents? It would be nice not to forget anything." The woman shouted, "Honey, everything's ready. The shirt is in the closet and the bag is in the hallway and the briefcase is on the nightstand." "Well, when was there ever a time when I didn't have time or forgot something? Let's go to breakfast before the omelet gets cold. I even made cheesecakes. They're still warm. Do you want me to wrap you a sandwich?" John ate with gusto. It was delicious, and he was quick to say, "Kenzie, don't be ridiculous. Have you forgotten that I can have lunch or a snack at any of my cafes? So keep it. And anyway, when are you going to quit your dog job? Driving around the city, saving lives, putting up with mean grannies with their constant complaints and all this for a pittance. You can't even buy a brand name item with it, and it's not even realistic to live on it. Why don't I get you into a private clinic? I have the right connections. They're at least a decent salary, or go to me as a manager." The woman sighed. Her husband started, "This record is not the first time," and she always answered the same thing. "Well, you know, I cannot treat for money, take away people's last unnecessary tests and drugs prescribed. It's wrong. And in private clinics, it's all over the place. My vocation is to help people, and grandmothers are not harmful at all, just a disease they suffer, and life is now very hard. You have to find an approach to them. My grandmother and mother all my life in this profession, and I from childhood also dreamed of working as a paramedic. And business is not my thing. I don't have an entrepreneurial spirit." John took a sip of flavored brewed coffee, took a bite of cheesecake, and snorted, "You're boring, Kenzie. Don't you ever get bored with the routine? It's the same thing every day for 3 generations. I can't do that. I need variety, new emotions, impressions. But you're a great cook, thank you." The woman looked into the eyes of her beloved. He seemed to be in a good mood, and dared to talk again about painful. "My dear, you just do not swear. I wanted to ask again. Let's take a child from the orphanage. We miss the laughter of children in the house. I suffer without children. We could take a baby and raise it as our own." The mood of the spouse immediately disappeared. He flared up, threw the spoon with a clatter on the floor, and angrily said, "We've already discussed it 100 times. I am categorically against it. Why should I have someone else's child in the house? I'll never love him. Do not know what kind of blood flows in it, and then he'll grow up to be a criminal and we'll have a lot of trouble. And anyway, I'm on the road, you're on shift too. We don't have time to raise our own. Let's finish this unpleasant conversation. I gotta go." Kenzie was so hurt she had tears in her eyes. She was practically screaming. "So by your logic, we're never going to have kids at all? What kind of family is that?" John softened, kissed her on the nose, and said, "A beautiful family. I love you and you love me, and that's enough for me. Don't worry about it. I'm off. Don't miss me. I'll be back in a week." Kenzie ran for the bus. She had a long shift ahead of her. But strangely enough, it did not make her nervous at all. On the contrary, she got moral satisfaction from the fact that she was helping people and doing something useful. In their family on a female line, all were paramedics. All the subtleties of the profession were passed down from generation to generation. So Kenzie, listening to her grandmother's and mother's conversations since childhood, already by the age of 12 knew exactly the symptoms of heart attack and stroke, and could easily render first aid. At least on her relatives and acquaintances she practiced enough. Dashingly applied langatas, gave injections and bandages. Naturally, she never dreamed of another profession. Her mother trained her in medicine, so she entered college without any problems and was the best in the course. From her earliest childhood, Kenzie had desperately lacked her father's love. She wanted so much for her father to praise her, admire her, take care of her. Perhaps it was for this reason that she didn't like her classmates at all. She always ignored their inept attempts to attract attention and considered them dummies, not taken seriously. Sometimes, of course, she ran with her girlfriends in one youth company. But she was very boring and uninteresting there. Dirty jokes, alcohol, and everyone sits in his cool phone. They only do what they do, that they take pictures of everything and shouting. The girls were friends with Kenzie, but they thought she was boring and arrogant, saying that she was playing hard to get, waiting for a prince. And so it turned out that already the diploma is on the nose, and Kenzie still has not appeared a permanent beau. Though outwardly the girl was very attractive, a good figure, thick black hair like tar, and searing brown eyes. Many boys called her Gulchatai because of her resemblance to an oriental beauty. During breaks, she liked to run with her friends to have a snack in the same cozy cafe. They invariably ordered fragrant coffee and tiramisu dessert, chatted about everything, and enjoyed cakes. It was there that she met John. He still owned only one cafe at that time. Once at their table, the waiter brought a huge chocolate cake and coffee, and a note. I looked into her brown eyes. I saw in them the reflection of the night, and I realized that it is impossible not to love her. What is your name, beautiful vision? The girls gasped and immediately looked at Kenzie. She was blushing. Of the three of them, she was the only one who was a searing brown-eyed brunette. She looked around and saw a stately young man standing near the bar. He was burning her with his gaze and smiling confidently. So romantic and mature with her has not yet met. The girlfriends were understanding and hurried away, giggling softly, while Kenzie and John were left alone at the table. He was saying something, joking, and looking at her so manco. And the girl realized she was in love. This imposing, well-groomed man seemed to her the very prince, grown-up, confident, reliable, which she had dreamed of since childhood. She listened to him with her mouth open and looked at him like a rabbit at a boa constrictor, completely submitting to his energy. And so their romance began. How beautifully John courted. He did not skimp on bouquets and gifts, once even ordered a boat trip on the river. The man was very flattered that such a beautiful and young girl, obviously not tempted in love, and even from a decent family, so much in love with him. He was also sincerely in love. He wanted to open the whole world for her, to teach her everything he knew, and of course to possess her. But Kenzie was in no hurry to do the latter. She was a medical doctor herself, and she knew very well how an affair outside of marriage could end. That's why she was adamant that all pleasure was only after the wedding. This made the man a little angry. Well, what a silly thing to do in our time, but at the same time very turned him on. Some kind of game, hunting, and in the final should be a coveted prize. If desired, the man could use the services of any girl, those themselves on his neck stacked, but it was now not so interesting, and he tolerated. All his girlfriends envied the girl. Well, how can it be? A budding businessman, young, handsome. About such a groom could only dream. Then, as it should be, there was an acquaintance with the parents. Surprisingly, John's parents very well accepted the naive and chaste bride, saw the girl as not spoiled and decent. Her profession is serious. Mom nudged her son. Good for you, John, for choosing Kenzie. She will make a good wife. You can bring her up under yourself. You can see that she is crazy about you. I'm happy for you guys. Just take care of her and don't hurt her. After acquaintance with the bride's family, Mom really began to feel sorry for her daughter for some reason. Oh, Kenzie, you'll have a hard time with John. He's so bossy and narcissistic. He sat there like a king, and you were like a creeper around him. You're going to have to do this and that, and you're going to have to do it, or you're not going to make it. Think about it. Can you live your whole life like that? Then Kenzie didn't pay much attention to her mother's words. She was so in love. She saw the future as happy. It couldn't be otherwise. On the contrary, she liked that John was in charge of everything. He was her fiancé, father and teacher in one person. And she, as a diligent student and a good daughter, wanted to please him, to do everything right, that he liked. Soon they had a lavish wedding. That day seemed to Kenzie the happiest then. Expensive restaurant, a lot of important guests. She called all the girls friends. They admired her flying lush dress and beautiful veil. She herself seemed like a princess from a fairy tale, all laughing and twirling in a waltz with his favorite. And at heart was so easy and good. My mother was already retired and moved to live in my grandmother's house in the village. There you had to look after the farm and vegetable garden. It was a pity to leave everything after the death of my grandmother. And the young left their family nest, not a bad spacious house in the bedroom district of the city. His grandfather built it. High ceilings, rooms with arches, a very interesting design. Now you cannot meet such a thing. The yard had a small flower bed, a gazebo, and fruit trees that her grandmother had lovingly planted. Kenzie loved her house and refused to move into the stuffy one-bedroom in a skyscraper that her father-in-law had bought them for their wedding. John didn't mind at all. It was really comfortable. There was a lot of room to spread out. He really also invested a lot, made a luxury renovation, equipped himself with an office. In the end, it turned out to be a modern mansion. Family life began. The first years, Kenzie was satisfied with everything. She was doing her best to please her beloved. He was always at home waiting for a delicious meal, cleanliness and order. And this despite the fact that the schedule at the ambulance was always frantic. At first, John saw it, appreciated it, praised it. The nights were hot. He whispered words of love to her and swore his loyalty. And the woman flew to the seventh heaven from happiness. One thing that depressed Kenzie was that she couldn't get pregnant. Doctors did not find any abnormalities, but the years went by, and the result was 0. John flatly refused to be examined. He considered it even humiliating. He was sure that he was fine. And in general, he was not worried about the lack of children in the family, went into business development. He often came home late, sometimes drunk. He demanded peace and quiet, ironed shirts and nourishing food, and he was not eager to see any children in the house. He couldn't stand their crying and shouting, their noise and fuss. Babies, even when they were guests, did not please him at all, but rather irritated him. Now he had a chain of diners, frequent business trips, and a life of his own, separate from Kenzie's. Slowly they were drifting further and further apart. There wasn't much to talk about. John couldn't stand talking about patients or her work, and Kenzie listened sadly to his monologues about how much the price of food from suppliers had gone up. The woman was eager to be a mom, and she would literally swoon when she held a friend's baby or a patient's baby in her arms. She realized that if they didn't have a child in their family, the relationship would soon fade away. There is such an expression, loneliness in two. It expressed her inner state very accurately lately. But her husband, it seems, did not want to change anything. He was satisfied with everything. He lived in comfort and prosperity with a beautiful and hard-working wife, but he was somehow not accustomed to consider her opinion. It was an ordinary shift. He and the driver were going to another call. Anonymous reported that a small child was sick. That's all. How old he was, what was wrong with the baby, nothing was known. All this looked more like someone's stupid joke, especially since the caller, judging by the voice, a teenager. Such a thing also sometimes occurs. But the team had to respond to the call. Kenzie got out of the ambulance and looked around. No one seemed to be around. Suddenly, she heard a baby crying. She rushed to the bench, which was already covered with snow, and gasped. There in the cradle lay a baby, a week old, no more. He was already blue from the cold and was screaming desperately. The paramedic grabbed the baby and immediately carried him to the car. The driver gasped. "What the hell is going on, Kenzie? How can you leave such a small child out in the cold? The world's gone mad. I'm going to kick that mother's ass. If you don't want the baby, take it to a shelter. At least it won't die. You can't just leave a baby like that in the cold. Animals don't do that." Kenzie unwrapped the baby, examined it. There were no visible injuries. The umbilical cord hadn't healed yet, so it wasn't more than a week old. The baby was warm and quiet, and when he felt himself in someone's warm arms, he covered his eyes. There was no note or anything in the basket or overalls. Only a bottle of formula lay under his pillow. Kenzie began to warm it in her hands, realizing the baby must be very hungry. Something unimaginable was going through her mind. How sweet it is, how cute, how pretty, how small and defenseless it is. How blue eyes are looking at him, not understanding where mommy has disappeared. My poor little one. What kind of mommy left you? Why are you outside? And she dressed you warmly. She gave you formula, so you know you're not completely lost. Why is life so unfair? I would give anything in the world to be a mom, and someone does not need a baby. What if I don't report it? Say it was a false alarm, and take the little boy in, raise him, love him, and be happy? No one would ever know. And Tim wouldn't give it away, he's a man of the house. Kenzie on impulse called her husband, whispering, "John, listen, we found an abandoned baby on the street. My darling, let's take him for ourselves, let's adopt him, I'm begging you. It's a boy, he's healthy and so miserable." But my husband hissed angrily into the phone, Kenzie, are you out of your mind? I've told you 100 times, don't you dare bring a mongrel back to the house. What are you trying to do? Go to court. You can do time for stealing children. I told you I don't have time. You should see a therapist. You're getting obsessive-compulsive. The chauffeur, who had known Kenzie for years, overheard their unpleasant conversation and said quietly, Kenzie, don't even think about it. We have to call dispatch. We got to get him to the hospital. They'll call the police. I know what you mean. I feel sorry for the kid myself. I can't stand it. But you can't do this. Maybe he has relatives? Maybe his mom will come to her senses. Things happen. Don't take it personally. We'll proceed as instructed. Kenzie understood everything. The driver was right. She pressed the baby against her, breathed in the unforgettable baby smell, wiped away a tear, and called the dispatcher herself. They handed the baby over to the hospital, gave a statement to the police, and went on with their calls. But Kenzie's soul was left with a heavy residue. The urge to be a mommy increased 100-fold. She began to sleep badly at night, and she kept thinking, why is John so hard? Why does he only think about himself? Doesn't he see how badly I feel? Why not give an abandoned child from the orphanage a happy childhood? You can't live like this without children until you're old, can you? What's the point of trying, of earning money? For whom? For what? Kenzie was really depressed and sad. She even started taking sedatives. The only thing that saved her was her favorite job. Only there she forgot about all personal problems and completely immersed herself in solving patients' problems. Strangely enough, it became easier. And here is another call. A woman in labor, contractions caught at home. This, alas, was also not an uncommon phenomenon. Young mothers are often careless and until the last do not go to the hospital. There was a snowstorm outside, you can't see a thing. Communal workers could not cope, and the roads in some places were not cleaned at all, and the snow kept flying and flying, covering everything around with a white shroud. They barely made their way to the country cottage. They were opened by a young pretty woman, blonde, very well groomed and pretty. She was oohing and ahhing and holding her hands over her huge belly. The woman let the medics in, took a seat on the couch and introduced herself. Good afternoon. My name is Pam. Something contractions started early. I thought false. I've had it before, only in vain panic raised. So I didn't rush this time. I thought it would go away. But no, they don't stop. And they're getting more frequent. I called a cab, collected everything. There's a bag in the hallway. Everything on the list, as it should be. And for me, and for labor, and for the baby. But the cab doesn't come. There's a snowstorm outside. They only answer, wait. And I'm so scared. How long do I have to wait? What if labor begins at home? And I'm alone. Thank you for being able to get here. I was beginning to panic. Oh, I get it. All right. Why don't you lie down on the couch? I'll take a look at you and let me see your chart. Wow. It's so early when everything's on time. Why are you sitting around, Mom? Let's get dressed now. Tim, grab the bag in the hallway and start the car. We need to get this patient to the hospital right away. She's going into labor. Pam cried out in pain, slumped on the couch, sweat trickling down her temples, and Kenzie immediately commanded, don't panic. Breathe slowly and deeply. Inhale. Exhale. You need to breathe through the contraction. It will be easier. I'm going to massage your back. The woman finally calmed down. The pain eased. And then Kenzie saw that on the wall in one and the other corner of the room, there were framed photos. And on them was a picture of her John, along with a Rosineccia, both happy and tanned with palm trees and the sea in the background. The other photo, on the other hand, was of snowy mountains. Kenzie almost fainted from what she saw, but she was still hopeful. Maybe there was some mistake. Maybe the man just looked so much alike. She said, and who is that with you in the pictures? Such beautiful photos. The woman in labor immediately brightened up and she answered, that's John, my fiancé. He's so cool, generous, kind. He takes me on vacation twice a year. And his baby. What a surprise for him. I love him so much and he loves me so much. Kenzie suddenly asked angrily, why isn't he around? If he loves you so much, where is he now? Pam blurted out, well, he's away on a business trip, and we had a big fight. He is still in shock from my pregnancy, men. They know what they are. It is difficult for them to accept it. But it's okay. He'll take our baby in his arms and he'll immediately thaw. After all, it's his baby. The blood rushed to Kenzie's face and she felt sick. Now she understood. That's why John was traveling on business. That's why he wouldn't take the baby from the orphanage. Of course, why would he? Because he'd soon have his own on the side. That means he's been tangling with Pam for at least a year. The woman cursed her husband. Bastard, bastard, bastard. How could he do that? And I, silly me, did not notice anything. All pity him, trouble at work, tired, poor. She was brought out of sad reflections by the voice of the driver, who flew into the house and was like a snowdrift, carrying back the things of the woman in labor, and said, "It's bad, Kenzie. My baby won't start. It just won't start. I don't understand. Everything was fine this morning and we even got here. What do we do? We've never had such an emergency before." The paramedic splashed her hands. "Oh my God, it's exactly the same. Okay, Tim, call dispatch and have them send another crew to the address to help, and we'll handle this on our own." "Okay, Pam, things are changing. We're not going anywhere yet. Let's just go to the bed. It'll be more comfortable. Just lie down and don't panic. I've delivered a lot of babies, so I can handle it." While Pam struggled with the contractions, as she had been taught by the paramedic, she was getting ready to deliver the baby, looking for clean sheets, boiling water, getting the necessary medications and gloves. As luck would have it, she kept coming across traces of John's presence in the house. The smell of his cologne in one of the closet drawers, the man's bedroom slippers, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, and his favorite shower gel. All of this was just getting to Kenzie. She was furious. But who knew what it would take for her to pull herself together and not strangle that bitch right there? It was her, Pam, maybe even on this very bed that John was having fun in bed with. And then he'd go home and live like nothing had happened, eating cheesecakes and steamed omelets in the morning, getting a massage and whispering love to Kenzie. The paramedic's hands were shaking, her heart was racing, but she restrained herself as best she could. "You've got to pull yourself together. I'm a medic. I took the Hippocratic Oath, which means I have to save the life of anyone. After all, this Pam obviously has no idea that John is married. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given him a baby and talked so openly about their relationship." Meanwhile, the contractions intensified, and the labor began. Kenzie was nearby, counting her pulse, listening to the baby's heartbeat, watching the process. The woman in labor was out of control. She was screaming and wriggling, and I even had to yell at her. "Shush! Calm down! Lower your pelvis! Don't wriggle! You're in my way. And the baby, too. You must obey me if you want to have a normal birth. Be patient. It's just a little while. You can see the head. I know you're in a lot of pain and scared. That's normal. You have to be patient. It'll be over soon. Come on, pull yourself together. All your strength to push, not to scream. And 1. That's good. He's coming." Thank God everything ended well, and soon a wonderful boy was born. And again the fate of the villain was ruthless to the paramedic, as if mocking her. She rubbed the baby, treated the eyes, the umbilical cord, held him in her arms. He cried sonorously, and her heart bled from the mere realization. Here it is, someone else's happiness, and it's not mine again. I am holding the son of my husband, to whom I have nothing to do. Then the second ambulance crew arrived, and the woman in labor and her baby were collected to the hospital. The woman was crying with happiness, holding the baby to her chest and babbling, "Thank you, Kenzie. I've tortured you. I know. I'm so grateful to you. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how I would be here myself. You know, my son looks so much like John. Just a copy. He'll be so happy now. Everything's going to be all right." The paramedic sighed heavily and replied dryly, "That's my job. Take care of yourself and your son. All the best to you." She hurried away, barely finished her shift, came home and howled at the top of her voice like a wounded she-wolf. In an instant, her beloved and dear husband became disgusting to her to the point of trembling. She hated him now. She took off her wedding ring from her finger, for the first time in so many years of marriage, and threw it on the floor, and threw the photographs of her husband there, tearing them mercilessly into small pieces and throwing them in all directions. And then rushed around the house, gathering her things, deciding to move out for a while, to run away, only to never see this deceitful and two-faced man again. She thought that divorce was the only possible solution now. That's why there was no point in dragging it out. There was no point in staying with a man who trampled love, humiliated and dishonored their family. The only person Kenzie could go to was her mom. That's where she went, to the village of Krasnoye. She took a couple weeks off work just in case. She needed to recover at least a little. She couldn't help people in such an inadequate state. She was shaking like a fever, and tears were pouring down. She packed her things hastily, taking only the bare necessities. After all, the house belonged to her mom, and she hoped that after the divorce Bob would move out, and then she'd come back. Kenzie sobbed the whole way, her face swollen with tears. It seemed like the end of the world, the end of life, the end of everything. Mom saw the state of her daughter and just splashed her hands. Kenzie could barely stand on her feet and couldn't really say anything, just sobbing hysterically. The woman took her into the kitchen, sat her down, gave her some Corvalol and gave her a drink. Then she asked quietly, "Daughter, my dear, what's wrong?" "God, I don't remember you like this at all. Tell me everything, it'll be easier. One head is good, but two heads are better, so maybe we can figure something out together." And Kenzie couldn't stand it. She told her mom everything. She just nodded and listened attentively. Then she hugged her daughter and said firmly, "I cannot believe, my daughter, that the son-in-law turned out to be such a scoundrel. I have always felt his coldness. He kind of arrogantly looked at everyone, very much like himself. But who made him like this? His parents are such good people. My in-laws and I often talk to each other. Yeah, it's a situation. It would be okay if he'd just gone off on the wrong foot once. A lot of men do that. As they say, the devil got in the way. But to start a second family, and even a child, such a thing cannot be forgiven. God be with him, daughter. Let him live as he knows how. Don't curse anyone, let them all go. Go tomorrow and file for divorce. There's not much to divide. The house is yours and the rest is yours for Bob to divide as he likes. Don't cry, sweetheart. Time heals. The pain will fade, and I'll be there for you. You stay with me for a while, out of harm's way. I don't know what's going on in Bob's head. It's a 40-minute train ride from here to the city." Kenzie wiped away her tears, feeling a little better. She sobbed, "Why am I so unlucky, Mom? My husband cheated on me. I have no children. How am I going to live now?" Miranda consoled her daughter. "We don't know the ways of God, my dear. But I know one thing. God doesn't give us trials beyond our strength. You have to get through it. There will be a white one after the black one. Your happiness is still ahead of you. You just have to believe." Kenzie stubbornly said, "I don't believe in anyone anymore, Mommy. I thought I was the happiest person in the world. I loved John so much and he betrayed me." The wise woman reassured her daughter, "You can't lump everyone into one category, daughter. Don't be so hot. There are decent men. Just all in due time. You still need to come to your senses, calm down. Let's go to bed. The morning is wiser." The wood crackled in the stove. The clock ticked in the silence. The feather bed was so soft. And Kenzie did fall asleep quickly, following her mother's advice. It was at this time that John came home, and he couldn't understand a thing. It was as if a hurricane had swept through the house. Closets open, half of his things were gone, and bits and pieces of pictures were lying on the floor. He started calling Kenzie, but she didn't pick up, only texted him, "I know everything. Congratulations, Daddy. Your son is wonderful. I'm filing for divorce. I can't see you anymore." The blood rushed to John's head. He was freaking out. What the hell is this nonsense? How did Kenzie know all this? Well, maybe it's for the best. I'm sick and tired of her. I'm going to get her some more. And then Pam called him on the phone. She was chirping happily. "Hello, sweetheart. Congratulations. You're a daddy now. We've got a baby boy. 302. What shall we call him? I'm at the 3rd hospital. Are you coming? I missed you so much." And she began to tell me about the birth and how it went. Listen, the paramedic was so nice, Kenzie, I think her name is. A very caring woman. Now all the pieces were falling into place, and the man shouted angrily, "Dura, that's my wife who delivered your baby. So that's how she knew everything. Who asked you to give birth? Maybe you fathered a child? How should I know? And now you want to tie me down with someone else's baby? I'm not going anywhere. I asked you to have a good abortion. You didn't listen, so now you have to raise it yourself. I don't need this hemorrhoid. We're breaking up. Don't call me again. I've got enough problems without you right now." Pam stared at the phone in shock and cried bitterly. All her dreams had come crashing down at that moment. She loved John very much and hoped to the last that he would get used to the baby and love him. But it couldn't be that the father didn't love his son, could it? But it turned out that he could. And the news that it was John's wife who delivered the baby at her home shocked her. She didn't even realize the man was married. They were dating for a year and went on vacation. How could it be? He never even casually mentioned that he was married and did not wear a ring. And he swore he loved her. The woman sobbed, looked at the little sleeping lump next to her and whispered, "Your daddy doesn't need us, Alex. He turned out to be a jerk, and what a jerk. Well, let him go. We'd better call Grandma and Grandpa. They'll be happy to have a grandson." John hung up after talking to Pam and threw the phone away. At first he was horrified. He didn't know what to do. His whole comfortable family life had collapsed. His wife was filing for divorce. The mistress wants to hang the child around his neck, even better. He did not even want to imagine that he would have to change dirty diapers and endure night cries and sleep deprivation. The decision came naturally. Fuck both of them. I'll sue my wife for the house. I've invested so much in it, and I'll live happily ever after. Don't you have enough other beauties? They've got children, their own and other people's. I'm still a hottie. I've got women hitting on me. John decided to take the bull by the horns and began to threaten Kenzie that he would take away the house because he had made repairs there, invested his own money. And in general, he earned more than her, so he would get all the property. The man was cocky and confident. Kenzie was scared shitless and decided to hire a lawyer, realizing that alone she will not be able to pull with the treacherous spouse. Frightened woman signed up for a consultation with Ethan. According to reviews, he was one of the best in town, and he looked like a very nice man. Well-groomed, tall, with penetrating eyes and a soft, open smile. The woman described the essence of the problem. He listened attentively. Then he said, "I'll take your case, Kenzie, and I'll do it for free. And I promise your husband will not take away your property. I'll do whatever it takes." Kenzie couldn't believe her ears. She hesitated. "Thank you, of course, but I know how much your services cost. I brought this here. Take it. It's fair." Ethan pushed back the envelope with money and became serious. "You see, Kenzie, I'm the one who owes you. I just didn't want to tell you. It's a touchy subject. You remember you saved a baby once, outside in the freezing cold? Well, that's my son, Carl. It's a complicated story. I dated a girl named Claire for a long time, loved her dearly. But she, as it would be softer to say, the character is very flighty and unpredictable. In general, we quarreled, then reconciled. In life, she could not make up her mind. Who wants to become? She threw from extreme to extreme. Her rich father contributed to that. He lived with another family abroad, but his daughter regularly sent money in huge quantities, on them then Claire, and lived large. She could disappear for a month or two and then show up again. But I'm a different kind of person. I wasn't brought up that way. I need stability and confidence in the future. Eventually I got sick of it, and I broke up with her. A couple months later, Claire suddenly called and announced that she was pregnant and the baby was mine. Obviously I had my doubts. I mean, she was a very windy girl. But nevertheless, like a decent man, I rented her an apartment, helped her, took her to doctors. But I decided for myself that until I make a genetic examination, I will not accept the child. The whole pregnancy, she got on my nerves, threw tantrums, then shouted that the abortion will make, then claimed that this is not my baby, totally confused me. And a week before the birth, she ran away again, disappeared somewhere. I didn't know what to think. I was worried. I started looking for her. And then I saw that clip on the news channel. They were saying that the ambulance crew had rescued the baby, and your name was mentioned. They were looking for the baby's parents. Well, I knew right away that Claire could have done something like that. She left it on the bench outside my house, you know? It's like she left it on purpose to spite me. I rushed to the orphanage, had him genetically tested, and Carl was my son. So now I'm raising him on my own. I hired a nanny. As soon as I picked him up, I felt he was mine, you know? And the grief-stricken mom was found later. She was partying like nothing happened in a nightclub. She was declared insane. Now she's being treated in a psychiatric hospital. They say postpartum depression, but I don't believe it. She was always a bit out of it. Not taking care, not thinking about the baby. They took away her license, I insisted. But she didn't mind. What kind of mother is she? So I'll be worried about my son all my life because you can't tell what's on her mind. That's the way it is. So I should thank you for saving my son. And as a token of my gratitude, I'll help you too. Don't doubt that we'll win this case. I'll dig into the ground, but I'll find dirt on your husband. If he's been living on 2 families, he must have other sins. I'll keep you posted. Just leave me an address and a phone number. Ethan really wanted to help Kenzie, and not just out of gratitude. He liked this sweet, a little sad woman with brown eyes as black as night. He went through Bob's entire entourage and found out things that made his own hair stand on end. It turns out that the businessman was a real ladies' man. In addition to the official wife and mistress who gave him a son, he had 4 women in parallel. It is unclear how he managed to all of them to powder their brains and get away with it. After all, they all did not know about each other, and each thought that she was the man's only and favorite. First on the list was, of course, Pam. Ethan decided to start with her and visited her. The poor woman was not herself. She even lost her milk from stress. She was still very upset about the separation. I don't know what happened to John. He never yelled before. He was so gentle. I was his secretary. I know it's an old story. At first it was an adventure, an affair. But then I really fell in love with my boss. He never told me he was married. He never wore a ring. We had such an affair. We went on so many vacations. I hinted to him more than once that I wanted to get married. But he kept joking and stalling. He had problems at work, or he had no time, or a little later. But once I got pregnant, it was like John was possessed. He started yelling, threatening, demanding I get rid of the baby. He even gave me money, and I lied to him. I couldn't do it. The doctor talked me out of it. He said I'd have health problems later. I could stay infertile forever. And then, I'm 25. I have my own place, the age to give birth. I want a child from the man I love. In general, I hid everything to the last, but you understand. My belly was growing, and soon John guessed everything, gave me a scandal, and went on a business trip. But I was a fool to the last, hoped that he would come to his senses, that when the baby in his arms to take, he would warm up and love his son. I called him from the hospital to make him happy, and he slung mud at me. It turns out that John is married, and his wife gave birth to my son at home. She's a holy woman, for God's sake. I couldn't do that. I hate myself now. I ruined someone else's family without knowing it. And John's a bastard. I'll never forgive him. I'll raise my son on my own. My parents will help me. At least they're happy to have a grandson. Ethan immediately suggested, Pam, all this is very sad, and I sincerely sympathize with you. I have a huge favor to ask of you. Could you come to the courthouse and tell me all of this? The thing is, Kenzie's divorcing her husband, and the bastard's not only messing up, he's trying to take her house away from her, even though it belongs to her mom. In general, you will help Kenzie a lot. Together we can nail and punish John. Otherwise, he will continue to screw with women's heads and ruin their lives. The lawyer was afraid that the woman would refuse. It happens all the time. Few people want to publicize their personal drama. But to Pam's surprise, she said, I'll be there. I'm going to spit in that bastard's face, and I'm going to apologize to Kenzie. That would be fair and just. You bet I'll help her because she saved me and my son, and I owe her a debt of gratitude. The other 4 mistresses were also outraged by John's behavior, and also agreed to confirm in court an affair with a womanizer. Moreover, each of them was a girl is not poor. The resonance was going to be impressive. Thus the compromise was murderous. Ethan also prepared all the documents for the house where the owner was Kenzie's mother, and Bob had nothing to do with its acquisition. With all this, he decided to go to Kenzie's house, so to speak, to prepare the client for the upcoming battle. He was greeted with a very warm welcome. Mom had set the table. Kenzie had just boiled dumplings with cabbage, and they began to feed him. It was very nice. Miranda tactfully left after lunch, giving her daughter a chance to talk to the lawyer alone. Kenzie was very worried. She kept asking, How was Ethan? Any luck digging up anything? What are my chances? It's not just my mom's house, it's our family nest. My grandfather built it with his own hands. 3 generations lived there. I can't just give it to John. The lawyer hurried to calm the client. Kenzie, do not worry. I have on my hands such dirt that I'll tear your ex-husband to pieces. But first, I'd like to tell you everything. This may come as a great shock to you, I warn you. Personally, I've seen a lot of things that would make my eyes water. But I think that you, first of all, as my client, should know everything, so to speak, to prepare. Anyway, listen. When Ethan told everything, Kenzie, instead of crying, suddenly began to laugh, and so loudly to the point of hiccups. She wailed. You know, Ethan, after all that I learned about my husband, I even, strangely enough, felt better. It turns out that among the string of his countless mistresses, I had an honorable place as a wife. The trophy, so to speak. What a John. What a bastard. My God, I had no idea what a monster I was living with under the same roof. What fools we women are. I tried so hard to be a model housewife, cooking everything fresh, pleasing him. And he cheated on me left and right. Tell me, Ethan, how can you trust people after that? I feel the most sorry for Pam. That bastard wouldn't even give up his own son. It's unheard of. It turns out he doesn't want his own children or anyone else's. He just wants to enjoy himself and use women, that's all. I've wasted so many years on this scoundrel. And now I'm left without a husband and without children. I asked John so much to take the baby from the orphanage, but he wouldn't. He flatly refused. Ethan shook his head and suddenly said, You're such a wonderful woman, Kenzie. Believe me, I'm speaking sincerely. I have someone to compare it to. I would dream that my Carl had such a loving mommy. I also really like you, not just as a person, but as a woman. And your husband is an idiot for not appreciating such a wife and mistress. Kenzie was taken aback. She looked at Ethan carefully. Are you serious now? Not joking? I remember how I felt when I took Carl in my arms. I just couldn't take him away from me. I wanted to hold him and kiss him all the time. I almost went on a crime spree. I thought I'd take him home. You see, I suffer from loneliness, and I would give anything for the opportunity to raise and love a baby. Ethan touched her hand, so gently, unbidden, and said quietly, Okay, Kenzie. After the trial, I'm not letting you, I mean you, go anywhere else, okay? Otherwise, I'm going to be a total asshole. You will never be alone again. We will love and raise Carl together. I won't ever hurt you. I won't ever cheat on you, I promise. Do you agree? Answer me? Tears sprang from Kenzie's eyes. She and Ethan hugged tightly, and they sat like that for a long time. And it was more important than kissing or intimacy. In that moment, their souls found each other. The court was full of people. Ethan made sure that the press and reporters were there, promising them the sensation of the century. Seeing such a crowd, John was confused. He then thought, Well, come, foolish wife. He will quickly kill her and say goodbye forever. But he hadn't seen the big surprise yet. Pam and all his other mistresses were deliberately waiting in the other room to make a spectacular appearance. That was Ethan's plan. John was so confident that he didn't even hire a lawyer. He just counted all the expenses for all the years of their life together. And he began his statement in a very confident manner. Your Honor, I lived with my wife for many years, but she never gave me a child. She's infertile, and I want to divorce her. On the subject of property division, Kenzie made pennies, I have my own business, so she has always lived off me, and therefore I have every right to most of our property, including our house, in which I invested a lot of money. Here you go. Here are all the renovation costs, every penny of it. But that's not all. My spouse is insane, she's insane, and she's not allowed to see patients at all. She even wanted to steal someone else's baby and offered to let me in on it. She has obsessions and hallucinations, and she keeps accusing me of cheating on her. The hall erupted into a murmur. The judge looked intently at Kenzie, and she whispered dazedly, What are you lying about? How can you do that? The lawyer gestured for her to be quiet, not to disturb the order of the courtroom, and stood up to speak. Your Honor, I have irrefutable evidence that John had mistresses, one of whom even bore him a child, which he refused to have. I'd like to call Pam to the stand. This woman worked as a secretary at John's company, and with her, he almost started a second family while being legally married to Kenzie. She's willing to testify and tell it like it is. And then something unimaginable began to happen. First, Pam came forward and told how long their relationship had been, how he lied about not being married, how he left her before she gave birth. Then the rest of the cheating women John was having an affair with spoke up. There was such a ruckus. The women got angry and shouted that they would tear the bastard to pieces right there in the courtroom. John got cold feet and didn't know where to go for fear of being lynched. He instantly lost his pride and realized that he had been caught in his own lies. And at the end of the process, Ethan handed over a set of documents on Kenzie's house. and it became clear that it could not go to John by law because it belonged to his mother. After such strong evidence, even the judge had his eyes on his forehead, and of course Kenzie got a divorce, and her house, and half of the acquired property, as it should be. But John was left with nothing. After the hearing, Pam approached Kenzie. She was very worried, did not know where to hide her eyes from shame. "Kenzie, I'm very sorry that everything turned out this way. It turns out I broke up your family without knowing it. And you realized who I was and delivered the baby and saved me and my son. Honestly, I'm proud of you. You are a saintly woman, and I am very guilty before you and ask your forgiveness." The paramedic only smiled bitterly and replied, "Yes, you are right. When I recognized John in the photo in your house, I could hardly control my anger. It was like that. But after it became known that besides you, John had other mistresses, I realized. It was him. Because if a man loves a man, he won't look away. You didn't know he was married. You were hoping for marriage and just wanted to have a family, like any normal woman. So we're both victims of this bastard. So I suggest we become friends. A sorority of deceived women. We could hang out. We'd have a lot to talk about." Pam was so excited. "Really? I'd like that. Well, you're welcome to come visit. Just leave me your address or phone number, and my son and I will come to you. Thank you again. I won't say goodbye." John was in the car. He was upset and angry. His whole plan had failed. Now Kenzie was all white and fluffy, and all his sins had been dragged out into the light of day and sifted through a sieve. And then he saw Kenzie coming out of the building. He couldn't help but admire her, slender, in a light dress, her hair flowing over her shoulders. She was being led by the same young lawyer. Both were smiling and talking about something. Strange. How come that for years of living together, John completely stopped noticing how beautiful was his wife? He was always running around, looking for adventure. He suddenly got so angry, jumped out of the car and ran up to the couple, began to shout, "Are you happy? You're sniffing around with the lawyer, huh? You won the case. You embarrassed me in front of the whole world. That's all right. I'll wipe your noses with all of you. I'll get myself a beautiful young girl. You'll see. You'll be sorry you ever got divorced." Kenzie was amazed at her ex-husband's insolence and replied sharply, "You left me no other choice, John. How and with whom you will now live, who you love, it's no longer my business. I hope we will not see each other again." And Ethan added sternly, "And remember, citizen, if you try to make life difficult for Kenzie again, you'll have to deal with me personally. I'm truly sorry for you, and for the women you've deceived. I hope no one else falls for your scam after it goes public. Now step back. We're in a hurry. Have a good day." The case was widely publicized. The press was full of headlines about a lovable and cunning businessman who was able to fool not only his wife, but so many women. Of course, bad rumors reached the high society, and from John turned away from the largest companions. Business over time began to crack at the seams. The man was on the verge of bankruptcy, and his personal life didn't go well either. His parents condemned him and stopped communicating with him. They were very ashamed that their son was such a scumbag. John was mad, spending his nights with one or the other night priestess. But all these one-time pleasures did not please him anymore. He lost his zest. He wanted, as before, warmth and comfort, that someone sincerely loved and pitied him, understood and supported him. But only nothing can return. And now the aging lover was, in fact, no one needed. The feeling of loneliness and longing ate him from the inside. Even alcohol did not help. Only now he began to think more and more often. And what he lives for? For whom? But Kenzie's fortunes began to change for the better. She started living with Ethan. In the evenings, she enjoyed taking care of little Carl, and literally dissolved in motherhood. How great it was to rock the baby, to bathe him, to play with him, to stroke those little hands and kiss his pink heels. The man also could not be happy that he finally found in Kenzie a loving mommy, a faithful companion, an excellent hostess. After the affair with Crazy Claire, the present life seemed to him a paradise. Everyone at work was also surprised, especially the driver, Tim, who kept saying, "That's how it happens, Kenzie. Just like in that fairy tale, she went and found her son. They wouldn't believe anyone." "It's not for nothing you didn't want to let the boy go. I guess your heart felt that he was yours." Time flew by, and here is the first tooth, and the first step, and the first word. "Mommy," said little Carl, Pam now often came to Kenzie and Ethan's house to visit with her son. After all, her Alex and Carl were almost the same age. They babbled merrily together in their baby language, rattling rattles. The women became best friends. They discussed their female joys and sorrows together, shared the successes of the kids. When the kids were a year old, they decided to have them baptized. Kenzie chose Pam as godmother to Carl, and Ethan took his colleague Anthony as godfather. Young people immediately got along with each other. Between them there was sympathy, and then the real love. Now Kenzie was calm for her friend. Anthony was a decent man. With such a man you can connect your fate, and he treated the children well. He was happy to take care of Alex. A year later, another miracle happened, and Kenzie unexpectedly became pregnant. She could not believe her happiness. It turns out that she was not infertile at all. Ethan was only glad. He loved Kenzie and had long dreamed of having children together. Especially the ultrasound showed that it would be a girl. Only once during all this time Kenzie accidentally saw John. They ran into each other literally head-on at the mall. The woman was almost pregnant, walking funny, waddling like a duck, and next to her Ethan, carrying Carl in his arms. The family was shopping for the holiday. The baby was gabbling away, and like all babies he was reaching for the brightly colored goods. Kenzie laughed as she explained to Carl what this or that was called, and of course she couldn't resist and bought him a toy. The couple didn't realize that John had been watching them for about 10 minutes. He too was wandering around the mall on a pre-holiday day. No, he wasn't expecting guests. He rarely had any visitors now. He just wanted to kill time. He couldn't stand spending weekends and holidays all alone. And then he saw Kenzie, and admired her again. Surprisingly, her fullness and large belly didn't spoil her at all. On the contrary, it made her touching. Her eyes were shining. You could see how much she loved the boy. And her new husband. How he looks at her with tenderness as circles around them. You can see at once. They have a strong family. And again I felt so disgusting, so disgusting. I wanted to howl like a wolf. John looked at them and thought, God, what an asshole I was. What was I missing? I had a full house, a smart and beautiful wife who loved me so much. I mean, how many times did Kenzie ask me to have a baby? But at that time I was furious at the mere thought that there would be someone else's child screaming in the house, that it would disturb my peace, that my wife would turn all her attention to him. What am I left with now? There is no one around. How scary it is. But I have a son, my flesh and blood little Alex. He's growing up without me, growing up and calling Pam's new husband Daddy, and I'm left out again, and I'm the one who disowned him. My own mother doesn't even want to see him after that scandal. It's unheard of. She talks to Kenzie like she's her own, she's in touch with Pam, and she even secretly visits her grandson, but she won't see her own son. Everyone has turned their backs on me. How is that fair? And the worst part was that Kenzie had glimpsed John, and she must have recognized him, but she hadn't even said hello. Instead, she'd turned away and walked the other way with her family. John was miserable and lonely and angry at the world, never realizing that he was the cause of it all. Kenzie tucked Carl in for the evening, told him a story, and the baby snoozed sweetly. Ethan finished washing the dishes after dinner. He helped his wife in everything now, realizing that she was having a hard time. He laid Kenzie on the couch, put a pillow under her waist, and began to massage her swollen legs, gently stroking and rubbing the skin, saying, "Are you tired, my dear? How is my princess? Has she gone to sleep or is she still dancing in her tummy? Be patient a little longer. Soon our girl will be born and will say to Daddy, 'Hello.' It won't be easy for us at first. Carl's still a baby and we'll have a little girl. But it's okay. I'll help. We'll get through this." Kenzie closed her eyes, smiled blissfully. She felt so good. She said quietly, "I'm so lucky to have you, honey. I've waited so long for you. And Carl is my talisman. It was with his appearance in my life everything began to change. Only with you I realized that the main thing in life is not work, but family and children. Thank you for that. Don't worry. My mom is just waiting for my granddaughter to be born. She promised to come right away and help at first. We will definitely manage because we are a family."